What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to the Gamecite Chronicles, the console gaming podcast where we sit down each and every week to talk about video games. I'm your host, Bonfire, and this is episode number 16. And I want to thank you all for tuning in last week, checking out even some of the older episodes, which is awesome. And I hope you had a good weekend. I'm recording this on Sunday morning, so a little bit later than I would like to, because we had a busy errand-filled day yesterday, and I didn't get a chance to sit down and record. And man, I hope your weekend was sunnier and drier as summer kind of kicks off for most folks. Because here in the Pacific Northwest, it was a bit rainy, so I didn't get to do much outside. But I hope you got some gaming in. I know I got some little bit of gaming time in, especially during the week. I had a pretty good week, mostly. It kind of flew by. The 4-day week, work week is kind of nice, but sometimes they're always just jam-packed with stuff you got to do and catch up with. Those of you that have, real jobs know what I'm talking about. But like I said, got some gaming in, and we made some progress on the yard. I know I talked a little bit about that last week, and I ranted about that, but feeling good there. We got our irrigation system in, and so now it's really just clean up and preparing for sod. And man, once we get that done, I'm going to feel I feel like I'm going to have this weight off my shoulders and kind of just breathe, because this yard's been weighing me down the last, I'd say, month or so. So I'm happy about that. If you were wondering or curious about an update, making some progress there. But, before we get into anything on the show, there's kind of one thing I want to say up front, then just kind of get it off my chest, because, and I'm not intending to come off as, preachy or anything like that, but I just kind of feel compelled to say something and just kind of acknowledge it and maybe offer some words of encouragement. There's a lot of darkness going on in the world, especially in light of some of the recent events that have occurred, not only, in Texas, but, politics wise, what we've all been through in the last 2 years or so, with the pandemic. And, with that, especially online, you just see so much false virtue. So, tons of virtue signaling. You see tons of people, weigh in, and everyone can weigh in on anything. And I know there's a lot of emotions out there. There's a lot of, depression. There's a lot of lack of hope. I think that's what a lot of people feel is, with inflation and just the economy and the situation that we see ourselves in the world. You see a lot of narcissism and, quite frankly, there's a lot of just pure evil. Whether you recognize evil or not, or believe that it even exists, I can tell you it does. And there's just so much running rampant on the world. And it just, I don't know, it's just kind of hit me hard lately, especially with what happened down in Texas. And so I offer two pieces of advice that kind of, I don't know, I feel compelled to say it and maybe offer some encouragement there. The first is hold your loved ones close, especially if you have kids. Tell them you love them. Cherish every waking moment that you have with them. I know for me, watching my son grow up, it's amazing. He's already grown up so much, and I just try to cherish those moments with him, because you just never know. And this time on earth is very short-lived. Second is a Bible verse that I've always come back to, and I know some of you may not be religious. Maybe you don't read the Bible, you don't believe in God, you're not a Christian or anything like that. Then that's okay. That's totally okay. And you can roll your eyes if you decide to tune out of the show. It's not for you. Then that's totally okay. But maybe just hear it out and just take it in. You don't have to be religious for this to maybe offer some hope or encouragement. But that it's a Bible verse that I think I've always kind of found comfort in it, even as a kid growing up, teenager. And that is Psalm 46:1. And that is, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. And that's just always resonated with me. And I just feel like it's always been appropriate anytime I've come back to it, but even more so now. I feel like it's super appropriate. So I kind of just wanted to, get that off the top and just recognize that and offer that encouragement. And if you're feeling, down, or even if this podcast or even some of my stupid YouTube videos offer any escape or brightness in your day, then that's amazing. And I hope it does that, or at least some sort of escape. So not to get doom and gloom, but I really wanted to take a moment to recognize that and offer that, because yeah, these are some crazy times that we live in. But back to this is a console gaming podcast, as I mentioned at the top of the show. So back into the video games. One of the things I wanted to mention is we're entering kind of E3 time. And there's quite a few showcases that are coming up. We got the Summer Games Fest, the Xbox Showcase. I think there might be another one or two that I'm thinking of. Who knows if Nintendo's just going to stealth drop like a Nintendo Direct or something. So I'm actually, by the time you listen to this, I'm heading out of town next weekend, but I plan to record the next episode ahead of time and kind of do just a fun topic to dive into. Less news-related episode, but hopefully it'll be a fun episode for you to tune into. But once I'm back, the Xbox Showcase will have happened, and I want to do an episode focused on that, go over the showcase, react to it, share my thoughts. And of course, if you have thoughts, please write into the show, whether it's on YouTube, Twitter, whatever. And I don't know if that'll be just kind of a one-off episode published. Probably just the following episode will be all about Xbox, so we can dive into that. And then for the others, I probably won't review in detail, but if there's some cool announcements or anything to kind of take away from those shows, we'll certainly discuss it there. So I think there will be lots to talk about in the coming weeks. And then I've been putting it off, but I do plan to have a guest or two on some of these upcoming episodes too. So some good stuff in the works. I just got to kind of crack down and do it, but we're entering that summer game time. And while E3 does not exist anymore, there's lots of news and people are just going to go and do their own thing anyways. So I think it's going to be some crazy times in this next 2 weeks or so. Now, for the uninitiated or those new to the podcast, remember the best way you can support the show is to leave us a nice rating on the podcast platform you're listening in, or if you're on YouTube, like the video and subscribe to the channel. I also do some YouTube shorts on there every now and then that are kind of fun to put together that I've been diving into, some supportive content for the podcast. You can also join us over on Locals, the Gamecite Chronicles.locals.com. My plan is it's a Patreon-esque platform, but I'm not asking for any financial support or anything like that over there. But what I plan to do is cultivate a community over there and then do some fun things once we kind of get some folks migrated over there. So that'll be fun. And then, as I mentioned, YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the channel over there. Follow us on Twitter at Gamecite Podcast. And lastly, remember, new episodes of the show go live each and every week on Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Now, for this week's show, I want to review the State of Play. PlayStation had their State of Play this past Thursday. So I want to talk about that. I want to review the games, share my thoughts. That'll be our main topic of discussion this week. But there's also a couple of news items that I wanted to cover too that I thought were pretty exciting. So there's an update to Assassin's Creed that I want to discuss. There's some rumors around that Bethesda Indiana Jones game. And lastly, a little late on this one, but I do want to mention it. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order sequel was officially announced. But before we get into that, let's talk about the games we're playing. And remember, let me know what games you're playing. Down in the comments below or right into the show. Let me know on Twitter so I can get you guys into the show. I love hearing about the various games that folks are playing out there, just because it's always so fascinating. Old ones, new ones, maybe replaying an awesome game. It's awesome to see. So let me know what you're playing. For me, I'm continuing Kingdom of Amalur: Re-Reckoning. Sorry about that. My alarm went off since I'm recording this on a beautiful Sunday morning. Nice and quiet house. But anyways, Kingdoms of Amalur: Re-Reckoning. Playing that, continuing that. Did a few more of the main quests just to try to kind of plug away through that. I think I'm around 65-ish hours or so. But I've entered in this whole new area. And man, I gotta say, this game is pretty massive. There's a lot to explore, and there's a lot of side quests. Some are interesting ones that I've enjoyed, but I'm kind of reaching a point where, this happens to me with open world games, where I kind of just get burnt out, and so I'll probably just plow through the rest of the story. I did just start a new faction storyline, so I'll probably finish that up. It's actually kind of interesting. If you know the game, it's like the Winter Fae one, this House of Sorrows or something like that, whoever they are. But I just started that one. So probably once I get through that, then I may just kind of try to plow through the rest of the main story, just because I get so burnt out on side quests and kind of exploring, and the OCD in me with these types of games, I don't want to miss something, but I'm also not like a dedicated completionist because I just don't have time. And so I'm kind of caught in this between a rock and a hard place, I feel like sometimes. So yeah, it's good, and I'm certainly enjoying it, but I kind of I'm ready to move on to something. I kind of just want to complete this, kind of get it off the list, see it through, and then move on, back to Elden Ring, or there's a couple other games that got my eye on, man. So yeah, doing that with Kingdoms of Amalur. I also started Diablo Immortal. Now, I know this is a console gaming podcast, believe me, and I do not play mobile games. I rather despise almost all of them. But Diablo Immortal released this week, this past Thursday, I think June 2nd is when it officially launched on mobile platforms, so iOS, Android, as well as on PC. It's not available. I'm typically a Mac user for my items, so it's not available on Mac. Otherwise, I probably would just boot it up here. But I decided to dive in it on my iPad, and my iPad's a couple years old, but nonetheless, I dove in, downloaded it, and I connected an Xbox controller because there's no way in hell I'm using touch controls. I can tell you that much. No, thank you. That's like one of my biggest gripes with mobile games. I'm not gonna do your touch controls. Though I will say, navigating the map and the kind of menus via touch controls, I think works out pretty well. Now, I've only played probably over an hour, just over an hour, and played through kind of the opening area, kind of went on my first main quest line. And one thing I'll say up front, is the game asks you to download a bunch of stuff. And I have, like the kind of baseline iPad, not tons of storage on there. And it kept asking me, like, I didn't have enough storage, and I was deleting some like old apps and stuff, trying to make some space on the iPad of stuff that I wasn't using, and it still wasn't enough. And it was like I had the base game, but they're asking me to download all this extra stuff, which come to find out, I think is like side dungeons and some side content you can engage in. So I couldn't download it. It was just kind of annoying. I mean, not really a good first experience, because like the app is already like 4.5 gigs, and then you're asking me to download like an extra couple, like a gig or two of other stuff, and it's just like, really? Why? Like, I don't know. It kind of came off the wrong way to me. But in playing this game, especially with the controller, which is much better than those touch controls, it feels like Diablo. I gotta say, it feels like Diablo. And I enjoy that. I enjoy that aspect of it. And after you play the kind of the opening mission, which is your very much typical introduction to a Diablo game. So I got through that kind of first main mission, and then I'm in the first like hub area, your hub town. And then all of a sudden there's players everywhere. They just spawned in. and then it becomes this like Destiny like hub of players just running around. And I was like, this is where that mobile game is coming into. And I know you can play with like co-op and join up with a party and do all kinds of stuff. But even this happens where players just running around even outside of town. So I went on to do the next, quest in the main storyline, and I'm kind of running through the next area, and there's just players everywhere, just doing their own thing, killing their own enemies, running around. Sometimes there's an event that popped up, and I'm doing that with a couple players just randomly. And I kind of say it's quite immersion breaking. Like, I understand this is a mobile game, but it is Diablo. And one of the things I love about Diablo is kind of the atmosphere, the eeriness of it. And when you have just these players just running around, it's like totally immersion breaking from the story. And I got to one of the next characters I was supposed to get to in the storyline, and then there's this player that's like standing right next to the main character that I'm talking to, just like spamming some attack. And I'm like, this is so distracting. I could not figure out how to turn off like online so these players would just go away. So I don't know. I just found it super annoying. Like, if I want to play and join up with folks, I'll do that. But I don't want to see them running around my screen. For God's sake. Oh, yeah, I just found it. I don't understand it. The other thing I want to say too is like the HUD is super distracting. There's so much on the HUD. And it's pretty clean. But again, after you get through that opening mission, and that's when all the battle pass stuff opens up, like microtransactions are now available to you. There's a whole chat thing. There's a menu system. All this stuff just crowds your HUD. And again, I'm playing on an iPad, right? So I don't have a lot of real estate to work with. And it's just super, super distracting. And I figured out how to turn off like the chat that pops up, which is just, I saw just being spammed with nonsense in there. So I finally turned that off, minimized that. But yeah, I wish there were more options to kind of customize your HUD, because there's just garbage on there. Like, I don't need all this stuff. Like, let me play the game. You know what I mean? So yeah, as you're playing through the opening moments of the game, it doesn't feel like a mobile game, because mobile games are obviously they're trying to get you to spend money, and everything's monetized, kind of pay to win schemes and all that stuff. And I didn't really encounter that. But after that, once everyone populates a world, your HUD's just blown up with garbage. That's where I saw the battle system, and all that stuff. And it's so far it hasn't asked me to like, oh, buy this and do that. Like, it showed me the battle system to like earn some whatever, but it's not overwhelming thus far. But that could be just because I'm ignorant to that stuff. Like, I could give two shits about that. I'm not paying a dime for this game. So yeah. All that aside, I have had fun with it thus far. I do kind of want to play more of the story. But this reminds me of how much I enjoyed Diablo 3. Now, I'm not a huge Diablo player, and I've only played Diablo 3 on console. So again, console gaming podcast, not PC. But I understand Diablo 2 was very much loved. It's got a cult following, and they kind of did a remaster of that, which I always wanted to dive into. But being more of a physical game collector or purchaser myself, that game, as far as I know, wasn't released on physical. So I never picked it up, though I would like to dive into that at some point to kind of take in that story. But Diablo 3 is awesome, and especially on Switch. I gotta say, that version of Diablo 3 on the Switch, especially like on the go handheld mode, is fantastic. So good. And thinking about that, getting Diablo 3 on the Switch, I'm surprised that Diablo Immortal is not also on the Switch, because there's other mobile games that have come to the Switch. I think Bethesda did their Fallout Shelter game. They brought that over. I want to say there's another game that I was thinking of that started as a mobile game, but then came to Switch as well. So maybe down the road, this will come to Switch, but I think this would be a perfect fit on the Switch. It's got the touch controls where you can do with the menu, and then you can play with a controller. I think it would just be a perfect pairing to run this thing on the Switch. Because if it's on PC, and I know there's a lot of folks like streaming on Twitch that are playing it on PC, why not? You know what I mean? I don't. It just makes sense to me, and I would much prefer to play it on the Switch than my iPad because, again, my iPad's a couple years old, so I gotta, by today's standards, an older model. It runs on there, but it's not. We're not running like high graphics here. I still think it's like 30 frames per second. You can kind of see some pixely graphics, and it's just not running that. It's running, and I'm playing the game. I'm not getting like frame drops or anything like that. Like it's fairly stable, but it's just not very pretty. And I know if you run this thing on a nice PC, it's going to look a lot better. And Switch could run it probably better than my iPad. So, hey, Blizzard, I know you got a lot of labor disputes going on, and people are unionizing over there. But why isn't Diablo Immortal on Switch? Huh? Make it happen. Make it happen. The last thing I'll mention about this is this gets me excited for Diablo 4. Kind of thinking about that, especially because Diablo 4, from the way I understand it, is kind of a return to form, more, to the likes of Diablo 2 in terms of its, darker storytelling. So I'm looking forward to that. And I wouldn't be surprised if at the upcoming Xbox showcase, we get some news on that. I'd love to see. I can't imagine it's going to come out until late next year. I don't know. I just got a feeling, because it's like everything I've wanted to come out in 2022 is like, oh, coming 2023. Yeah, we'll get to one of those games here a little bit later in the show, but nonetheless, I'm excited for Diablo 4, and I got an itch to dive back into Diablo 3 on my Switch. And the other thing too that was really cool, and slightly off topic, but that was really cool when they released Diablo 3 on Switch, is they came out with a specific Diablo amiibo. And that thing was awesome. It was like the treasure goblin from the game as its own amiibo. That is dope. And it came with a really unique box too. That thing was awesome. Do more of that stuff. Come on, Nintendo. Work with your partners and do more of that stuff. That is amazing. Come on. Now, let's dive into some of those news items. And the first one is an update to Assassin's Creed Origins. So this week, there was an update that was released for Assassin's Creed Origins on the PS5 and Xbox Series X, bringing the game on those platforms. I should say the Xbox Series X and S. But it brings that game up to 60 FPS on those platforms. So a nice, smooth frame rate. I think there's also some other stuff involved in the update. I didn't really read into those, but the big item is 60 FPS on PS5 and Xbox Series X and S. And this is awesome. The other thing too is the game is coming to Game Pass on June 7th. So if you haven't played the game, you're a Game Pass subscriber on the Xbox ecosystem, you can play it via Game Pass on June 7th. And I bring this up because I loved this game. I think this game is fantastic. It's so good. Now, this game came out back in 2017, but I just fell in love with it. I think it's got a good-sized map, especially when you compare that to the likes of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and from what I've heard of Valhalla, it's not totally filled with bloat. Like, it's a big game, but it's not just bloat-filled map that doesn't seem to end. I thought it had a good story, and I liked the characters. What was his name? I think his name's Bayek. Him and his wife, I thought they were great characters. It was good to see their kind of relationship throughout the events of the game. And I think one of the things that I liked most about it is the tomb exploration and kind of some of the, for lack of a better term, mystical creatures that you kind of encounter. But exploring Egypt was so awesome. Kind of tomb raiding, so to speak, was really cool. And I really enjoyed that game. And I think that Assassin's Creed Origins is kind of proof in the pudding on what a franchise can do, especially an annualized franchise can do when they take time off to kind of reinvent themselves and bring something new to the table. Because if you remember, Assassin's Creed Origins was kind of the culmination of taking a year off. So I think it was Assassin's Creed Syndicate, if I'm not mistaken, that came out. Then they took a year off. Then they came back with Assassin's Creed Origins and kind of reinvented the Assassin's Creed franchise to what we know it today. Because you had Origins, then you had Odyssey, and then most recently Valhalla. So I think that's the proof in the pudding, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I'm excited for this because Call of Duty is going to do something similar. So if you recall, and we haven't talked about Call of Duty too much here on this podcast, though I do want to and will. But Call of Duty is taking 2023 off. There will be no Call of Duty game in 2023, or so they've said, which is crazy because that'll have been like 19, almost 20 years straight of annualized Call of Duty games, which is, if you think about it, a really phenomenal feat from a development standpoint, but also exhausting. I mean, I'm sure there's some of you out there that have had a Call of Duty game every single year of your life, which is wild to think about. Like, you don't even know what it's like to not have a Call of Duty game release in your life, in your lifetime. It's making me feel a little old, but that is wild to think about. And so I'm excited to see what they do with that time off. Do they come back and bring something new to the table? Do they reinvent themselves? I don't know. I want to see what happens. Additionally, as a side note, it'll be really exciting to see how other people use that space. Because Call of Duty is just a behemoth, every time it releases, and it's always like the top selling game every year. And people kind of stay out of the way of Call of Duty. But now that window is wide open, will there be a lot of people taking advantage of it? It'll be exciting to see. But Assassin's Creed Origins has a new update. For me, it kind of beckons me to go back in, just see how the game runs because I have the game on the Xbox. Because I think at the time when it came out, it performed better on Xbox One X than it did on PS, or not, it wouldn't have been One X. Maybe it would. I don't know. All I know is it performed better on Xbox, I think, than it did on PlayStation when it came out. So that's why I kind of jumped into that platform. But I kind of feel compelled to go back in, maybe clean up some achievements or something like that. Just kind of run around and explore the world. Don't know that I actually will, but I love this game. And out of the newer Assassin's Creed, I highly recommend it. Especially Egypt, man. That's such a cool setting. Such a cool setting. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Now, the next news item I want to dive into is these rumors kind of percolating around Indiana Jones. So, that upcoming Xbox-owned Bethesda game, Indiana Jones, there's rumors saying that this will not be exclusive. So this rumor, as reported by VGC, Video Games Chronicles, states that Windows Central's Jez Corden stated on an Xbox podcast that he heard around a year ago that the game wouldn't be exclusive to Xbox. He went on to say that, and quote, "The only information I've had on Indiana Jones is that it wasn't exclusive. But that was a long time ago. Maybe something has changed." End quote. And that's really all the article says. But I think this is interesting and certainly needs to be taken with a grain of salt with that second quote. But I gotta say, I could see this happening. I could totally see this happening for Indiana Jones being multi-platform. And I think that could happen for, potentially because maybe part of the deal with Bethesda to get the license for Indiana Jones was that it is multi-platform. And I'm pretty sure this was in the works before Xbox acquired Bethesda. Could be wrong there. So maybe Microsoft inherited those contract terms with, I think it's Lucasfilms. So that could be a factor here at play. Not 100% sure. Just speculating. But this wouldn't be unique for Xbox either to have multi-platform games coming from their first-party studios. You look at Mojang in the Minecraft series Minecraft just alone, when Xbox bought that, they didn't pull Minecraft from other platforms, is what I'm trying to say. And then they developed, Minecraft Dungeons that came to all platforms. You have the Elder Scrolls Online that will kind of maintain its multi-platform approach. They've stated Call of Duty with Activision will continue to be multi-platform. I think at least for a couple more years, though I don't see why they would make that Xbox exclusive. And again, that franchise is a behemoth. I think you stand to lose money if you don't. But I could be wrong. Could be totally wrong. And then on the PlayStation side, Bungie, with that acquisition, Destiny is going to maintain multi-platform. And I think we'll continue to see this type of stuff as the industry continues to just self-consolidate. And I think it makes sense. I think it's good when some of these big platform holders are kind of acquiring these big verticals or creating these verticals amongst their kind of first party lineup to operate in that manner and have an option to tap additional markets outside of their platform base. I think that makes sense. So why not? Why wouldn't they do that? And again, if Indiana Jones is multi-platform, that the kind of marketing is still going to push it to Game Pass, and that's going to be the benefit to be on Xbox, is to say, hey, Indiana Jones is coming to all platforms, but you can play it on Game Pass day one. So if you're a subscriber, it's there for you. Otherwise, you can go out and buy the game. I don't really see a downside to that, but maybe I'm missing something, and I'm sure you'll let me know. Now, with that all said, though, my own personal thoughts on this is I do think something has changed. I do think that this will be an Xbox exclusive, even though after all that I just went on, I do think it'll be an Xbox exclusive, because I think that we saw this with Starfield already, where that game I think started out as a multi-platform game. And I believe there's even rumors that PlayStation at one point was trying to get Starfield as an exclusive before the Microsoft acquisition. But I think with the Microsoft acquisition, they decided to make this an exclusive game. And I could see this again. I think the same thing happened here with Indiana Jones. This is a new IP, and with new IPs, Xbox, during the whole acquisition thing with Bethesda, had talked about that those will be exclusive. So I think that's what's going to happen here. And I think Xbox could see this as, their Uncharted competitor. And, Uncharted is just a big PlayStation franchise for their competitor. So I think it makes sense to have that direct competitor to Uncharted in the Xbox ecosystem. And we all know that Uncharted is clearly inspired by the likes of Indiana Jones, as well as Tomb Raider. So, I don't know. I just think that makes sense. Now, I'm sure we'll find... I guarantee you we'll see this at the upcoming Xbox Showcase. So, maybe we'll know here by next weekend when they show it off. But who knows? So, let me know what you think. But the last thing I want to say about this game is that I'm still very curious on it, because this is being developed by Machine Games, who typically make first-person shooters. So what will this game be like? Will this be a case like Guerrilla, where you have a typically well-known first-person shooter studio switch to that third-person action-adventure game? Will it be a case of that? I don't know. I really don't know. So I'm very curious on what this game looks like, what kind of game it is, how it'll play, and obviously the perspective. I'm not saying Machine Games can't make, third-person games, or that Indiana Jones couldn't be a first-person game, though I think that would be super weird. But it'll be interesting to kind of see how this game plays out, because I think Machine Games is a very competent developer. I like their games. But this one should be interesting. So we'll see. I think we'll know a lot more here next week. And the last piece of news I wanted to dive into is the sequel to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order was announced. So during the Star Wars celebration, which I know I'm a little late to this one, happened, what is it, 2 weekends ago now from the time I'm recording. But they showed off the first trailer, and the game is called Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Now, this game is set to release in 2023, and our boy, Cal Kestis, returns as the main character, which is pretty cool. So the trailer is short. I think it's like a minute and a half long, but it shows off some pretty interesting bits. Gotta say, so there's some new Inquisitors. Cal loses his lightsaber in the trailer. There's a shot of what I think their ship's name's the Mantis or something like that. It's crashed on a planet. There's none of his crew members that from the first game are really seen in the trailer at all. So you kind of wonder like what's going on there? Like where are they? And then I think the most intriguing shot is towards the end where Cal is by himself in front of a Bacta tank with someone inside. And they've kind of got this white, it almost looks like Sephiroth or something, like some Final Fantasy character, this long white flowing hair. So makes you wonder kind of who this person is. So I don't know. You can kind of speculate. And I haven't really looked into many rumors or speculations about what people think, but I have to imagine it's some like old timer Jedi that he found or was told to found or something like that to help him on the mission. I don't know. But I got to say, I am excited for this because I genuinely think the first game is great. Now, I came into the first game a little bit later than I probably should have because I think the game came out in what? 2019? I'm going to look this up real quick because I don't remember. There we go. Yeah, okay. So it came out in 2019. Yeah, I was playing a bunch of other games. I think that's when Gears 5 came out too. That's when Outer Worlds came out. So I was kind of buried in those games that I talked about. That's also when Death Stranding came out around that time. That was a big fall for some games. So I didn't get into that game right away, though I think I picked it up later that year on Black Friday and played it early the next year. Because it was always a game that I was like, yeah, it looks interesting. I'm a big Star Wars fan, so I definitely want to jump into it, but I had so many games at the time where I was like, okay, I just got to wait. But so many people were ranting and raving about this game and how great it was that I was like, okay, I got to jump in sooner than later. So I did. And man, it is awesome. It's a really, really good game. I was very surprised by it. I love the Dark Souls influence with its combat, the checkpoint system, the leveling up system. Very inspired by Dark Souls. And I liked it. I love that. I also enjoyed the map design and some of the locales and kind of how you go from like planet to planet. That was pretty cool. And I just thought it was a good Jedi story in the way they kind of incorporated, the events of, Revenge of the Sith and, holocrons and Jedi temples and all that stuff, stuff that you see in like Star Wars Rebels, that animated series. I liked it. I just thought it was a great story and an awesome game. And I also thought it was cool the way you could kind of customize your character and lightsabers with different outfits, different kyber crystals, colors, and stuff like that. Also, you could switch between, one blade or two blades on your lightsaber, which was a lot of fun. So, great game. I highly recommend you play it if you have not. I know you can get the game super cheap. I do believe it was on Game Pass. I don't know if it's currently on Game Pass. I know it was on Game Pass through the EA Play at some point. So highly recommend it. Check it out. One of the things EA did mention in I think the press release, it was reported by some news outlets, is that there will be some more lightsaber mechanics. And then someone also pointed out that Cal has a blaster holster, a blaster in one of his holsters, which he didn't have that in the first game. So it makes you wonder, will there be kind of some shooting mechanics? Like, can you use a blaster now too in this upcoming game? So that'll be interesting to keep an eye on and kind of how they upgrade and update the mechanics in this game. So what is it, 2023? So sometime next year is when this bad boy's coming out. And I am very much Looking forward to it. So now, approximately 40 minutes or so into the show, let's get into that state of play, the main topic of today's show. So Sony had their state of play this past Thursday, which was approximately 30 minutes long. And so I want to walk through each of the games that they announced and showed, share some thoughts, and then kind of review the show as a whole, and then pick out some of my favorite announcements. So, the state of play. It opened up with a big one, a banger with Resident Evil 4 Remake. They officially showed off kind of a trailer with, I think it had some gameplay in there, and a release date of March 24th, 2022. And they also mentioned there is a VR component being worked on for PSVR 2, which is pretty wild. Kind of makes sense though too, because I think they did, I want to say, what was it on the Oculus? They did a Resident Evil 4 VR version for that game with the original game. So I think this makes sense, but that's a big one. We all kind of knew that game was in the works. It had been rumored for a while, but now it's officially confirmed. I think it has the same character model as Leon from Resident Evil Remake 2. So some cohesion there between the games, and I'm excited. I'm very, very excited. Now, I do have a confession to make, which I've talked about on one of the previous episodes of the show on games that I've yet to play. I think it was the top 10 games I've yet to play, and Resident Evil 4 is one of them. I have not played the original Resident Evil 4. I've just never gotten around to it. And I've kind of been late into this franchise. I was more of a Silent Hill guy back in the day than a Resident Evil guy. But I kind of feel compelled to play through this game now before the remake comes out. But nonetheless, a banger opener. After that, they dove into Resident Evil 8. And here I thought we were going to get the official announcement for the Resident Evil 8 DLC. But no, they're making Resident Evil 8 for PSVR 2. So they're working on a VR component for that game to where you can play it all in VR, which it makes sense. They did this with Resident Evil 7, but now we're doing it with the Resident Evil 8, and I can't imagine playing either one of those games in VR. I always kind of thought about trying Resident Evil 7 in VR, but some of the opening moments, Resident Evil 7 is terrifying, especially some of those opening moments. Like I think about, this isn't a spoiler or anything, but there is a moment. Oh, I don't think it's a spoiler, and if it is, I'm sorry. But there's a moment in that game where like your hand is literally chopped off, like you just cut off, and you're like attacked with a chainsaw. I could not imagine experiencing that in VR. Like that almost seems traumatizing. I don't think I could survive it. So and then, in Resident Evil 8, a very similar thing happens in that game. And there's some other moments too in that game where I'm like, I don't think I might have a heart attack. I might have a heart attack and just die. But yeah, Resident Evil 8 coming to PSVR 2. So that's exciting. And then they showed off the sequel to Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, Walking Dead Saints and Sinners 2. And there's some subtitle there that I forgot to type down, but that's coming to PSVR 2. So look forward to that. Then they showed off No Man's Sky for PSVR 2, which is great. That's such an amazing comeback story with No Man's Sky. And I have not played that game since it originally launched back in, gosh, what was it? 2016, 2017, something like that. It's been a while since I played that game. And actually, on my Twitch channel, that was the last game I ever streamed on Twitch before I kind of, moved on from that stuff. Just wild. But they've updated that game so many times. Like, it's a completely different game. Found a cult following. And they continue to release a lot of content for free for that game. So it's a very cool comeback story for that game. And now coming to PSVR 2. Then they showed off the big one, Horizon Call of the Mountain, coming exclusively to PSVR 2. They showed off some gameplay for this one. And so they showed off fighting dinosaurs, which I thought looked really cool. Like you get a bow and arrow and you can kind of fight the dinosaurs, robot dinosaurs, I should say. There's a lot of climbing, kind of vaulting up. There's kind of this opening section where you get attacked, and it just looks wild, man. Looks really, really wild, I gotta say. And I really want to try this one out. I do. I think it looks really cool. I think it'd be fun to shoot the bow and arrow at some robot dinosaurs in VR. It sounds pretty cool. So I gotta say, I think this one will be. I think this is going to be kind of the main seller for PSVR 2, like the main game that everyone gets. Though, I gotta say, they have to get Half-Life Alyx on PSVR 2. They have to. I'm sure Valve would let that happen. So that's the other one that they have to get. After that, then one of the developers came on and said they're also releasing an update that day for Horizon Forbidden West that includes new game plus, upgraded visuals, you can reset your skills, there's transmog for outfits, there's ultra hard difficulty, and a bunch of new weapons and trophies. I got the platinum for that, so hopefully I don't screw up with that. I know it doesn't take away from my platinum, but I think all the trophies are going to be related to New Game Plus, which I'm not much of a New Game Plus guy, gotta say. But if you are, look forward to that. Then, a pretty big announcement that I honestly didn't see coming. Marvel's Spider-Man is coming to PC on August 12th. And then afterwards, I think during the press release, they also said, I think a few months later, Miles Morales is also coming to PC. I think this is huge. I thought this was the one franchise that they wouldn't touch to bring to PC, because Marvel Spider-Man, I think they just released a statement saying that both Miles Morales and Spider-Man, so the Marvel Spider-Man franchise on PlayStation has sold 33 million copies. That's insane. That is the biggest franchise, I think, on PlayStation platforms ever. And it makes sense for them to bring this over to PC from a financial standpoint. And I saw some articles talking about I think PlayStation's or Sony's forecast on the PlayStation PC side was like 300 million or something like that. Like, it was huge compared to what they had forecasted even last year. And it's clear now why they forecasted that with just this game. I think there's also rumors that Returnal is going to be ported over to PC, as well as Sackboy, which Sackboy totally makes sense. Returnal will be interesting because with the DualSense controller and some of those mechanics with there, how does that work on PC? I'm sure it's not too hard to figure it out, but either way, this is a big one for PC, and I think I'm very curious to see how well this does on PC. Now, it's good. I think ultimately it's a good thing for these games to be available to more players. I understand it from that perspective. But I don't know. I thought this was the one franchise Sony was going to kind of keep to themselves for as long as they could and be kind of the last in line. But this is going to be a big one. This is a big one. So, and I'm sure the modding's going to be fun out there, and it's going to run just beautifully on some of those massive rigs y'all got. So that's a big one. That one surprised me a little bit. So August 12th, if you're on PC, though this is a console gaming podcast, I don't know why you'd be listening to me, but Marvel Spider-Man coming to PC. After that, they showed off that game called Stray, which there seems to be quite a few people interested in this game. I gotta say, this does not speak to me whatsoever. And maybe it's because I'm not really a cat person. The cat looks adorable. I get it. I grew up with cats. I've always, my mom always had cats in the house, and I got a cat in high school, and actually, what was it? Even the last 2 years, she finally passed away. Like, she lived a very long life. But so I get it, but I'm more of a dog person now. So I don't get it. I don't see the appeal of this game. But they showed off a little bit of gameplay. And it just looks weird. Like, you're this cat kind of roaming these alleys, and then there's all these like robot characters kind of roaming around and you kind of interact with them. And then there's these other robots that are like searching for you. So there's stealth elements to the game where you're hiding from them or kind of sneaking around them. I don't understand what the purpose is. Like, what are you doing? What's the goal here? What's the point of this game other than it's cute and got cats in it? I don't know. This game just doesn't speak to me. But this game comes out July 19th. The cats are certainly cute. And the interesting part about this one really kind of took me. This game is coming out day and date on the new PlayStation Plus. This is interesting, ladies and gentlemen. Is this the sign of things to come to where second-party and third-party games will release day and date on PlayStation Plus? Now, they've come out, Sony's come out and said their first-party games, they have no plans to put them day and date on the new the subscription system because that will impact development. We've talked about this before. We have talked about this before. I think that's the right move personally. And I've talked about my reasoning for that. But this one, day and date on PlayStation Plus. Very, very interesting stuff here. Will other games, I'm sure other games will come out day and date on the PlayStation Plus. So I don't know. Is Sony kind of going back on this, or was this maybe a deal where they had to put this on maybe the PlayStation Now service and then transferred it over to PS Plus? I don't know. I'm curious to see how many more games kind of fall into this category with day and date release on the PlayStation Plus subscription. I imagine it'll be these kind of indie style second and third party games. I don't know if Stray is a second party game because I don't know if PlayStation is helping fund it, but either way, I thought that was a really, really interesting piece of news. After that, as I take a sip of my coffee here, after that, they showed off the Callisto Protocol. This game looks fucking awesome. So good. Very Dead Space, because it's made by, I think, a couple of the guys from the original Dead Space team from Visceral Games. And it looks so awesome. So awesome. The trailer, you just get instant Dead Space vibes from it. I love it. I freaking love it. But the enemies, they're not like aliens, I don't think. They're more like zombies. And it just looks so good. So good. I gotta say, though, the opening shot of that trailer looked just like Destiny. Looked like Destiny artwork there. And I was like, wait, is this Destiny? Like, it just totally caught me off guard. Like, very Uncanny Valley-ish. But it turned out to be Callisto Protocol. And there was some news recently, because this game was, I think it's done by the PUBG dev, or being published by the PUBG guys. And it was supposed to take place in the PUBG universe, but they recently came out and said that is no longer the case because the game has kind of expanded into its own universe. So I don't ever know how that was going to work, but either way, it's its own thing now, which is probably for the better. And it has a release date, December 2nd, 2022. Now, hopefully that doesn't get pushed out. It might, the way things kind of go these days. But man, I am very much looking forward to this game. This is probably one of my most anticipated games this year because I just think it looks awesome. And we don't get too many games like this in like a survival horror genre. I mean, you have obviously Resident Evil's come back with the remakes, and then Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 8. Outside of that space, you may have some indie games that have kind of trickled and made their way in there. You know, I think that Martha is Dead game that came out. You have the Layers of Fear games. I know there's a few PC centric ones as well, but like I really don't feel like there's big AAA survival horror games. Now, last week we talked about the rumors around Silent Hills, so maybe they're making a comeback, and then Dead Space is eventually coming back as well. But there's not a lot in this space, and so I'd love to see more work in this space, especially in the vein of Dead Space. Now think about this. If this game does hit that release date, December 2nd, and then almost 2 months later, we get the Dead Space remake. Man, those are two back-to-back bangers if you ask me. Okay, now after that, they showed off a game called Roller Dome, which is kind of it's an indie game, and it has a really awesome art style. It's very like cartoony, hand-drawn art style. You're basically kind of rolling around in this derby area, kind of like shooting enemies. I don't know if it's multiplayer focused. It kind of looked like single player, where you're kind of in this dome, kind of taking down AI enemies. But then you're also doing like tricks, like Tony Hawk. Like you're going off ramps, doing tricks, but then you're shooting stuff and things kind of slow down. I don't know. It was a really interesting game, really interesting concept. Not really for me, but that comes out on August 16th. And then a game called Eternites, which this game comes out early 2023. And this is super Japanese. I mean, this was anime all the way. And it kind of reminded me of the way they showed off Scarlet Nexus. Obviously not with the cool looking enemies and some of the superpowers, but from the way some people were describing it, is very Persona inspired. And this is touted as an action game / dating sim. So you definitely got your ladies in there. And yeah, weebs rejoice. Maybe that's a game for you. I don't know. It didn't really resonate with me. So Eternites, that's what that game's called. And then a big one, back to Capcom. They showed off Street Fighter 6, kind of a long trailer. And this one was an interesting trailer. Go check it out if you're a big fighting game fan. But they opened up with this kind of open world area. Like this character, he's like in the gym training. And then he was running around this like open world area, kind of doing things. And I'm like, what is this? Like, is there like an open world element to Street Fighter 6? Or is it like a hub world that you can kind of navigate to different activities? I don't know. I don't know much. I'm not much into the Street Fighter series in fighting games, so I really don't know what I was looking at here. But one of the things I thought was interesting is the art style. Like when you're actually doing the fighting game, the art style is very, very interesting. It's almost like graffiti-like in kind of the colors that they're using, like when you're hitting someone. And the background is almost like grayed out. It's intentionally gray. Like it's still designed and it's beautiful, but it's like grayed out to where your characters pop out. I just thought it was really, really interesting. Like a very interesting art style choice. This game comes out 2023. So I'm sure we'll see more about the roster as they do with these fighting games. And we'll see some more gameplay here, but really interesting stuff. The logo I'm not a big fan of though. Like it's the 6 that they did there. Like I don't like it. So either way, if you're big into Street Fighter, I think you'll have that to look forward to. Then after that, they showed off Tunic. So Tunic is the game that's early, I think a month or two ago, released on Game Pass. And I think a lot of people really enjoy that game. Very Zelda-esque, Zelda-inspired. But that's coming to PlayStation on September 27th. I have been wanting to try that game because it does look cute, looks cool. And I like the Zelda games, so I can get down with that. And then another weird kind of indie game that I don't fully understand called Season: A Letter to the Future. And this is this character that basically kind of travels around and, takes pictures and, audio of various places that she travels to. And that's kind of like her thing. And so you're kind of doing these things. So I don't know. Very, very interesting. Very obscure in my opinion. But that comes out sometime in the fall of this year. And then lastly, they closed out with an update to Final Fantasy 16. So they showed off a new trailer and kind of talked about how the game's coming along. But the new trailer, dude, this game looks gorgeous. Looks so good. It's got awesome looking dragons. It's got fun. They showed off some combat that looks really, really fun. Very reminiscent of Final Fantasy VII Remake. So I'm sure there's some slight changes and tweaks to that system, but it's kind of what it reminded me of. Kind of this real time combat and all that, and I loved it. I loved that Final Fantasy VII Remake combat, so I'm very much looking forward to this. Like I said, beautiful graphics, and then kind of they put an emphasis on the classic summons like Shiva, Ifrit, some of those dudes, and those character models look freaking amazing. So those are coming back. I don't pretend to understand what's happening in terms of story and some of these characters and all that stuff, but looks awesome. That game is slated to come out in summer 2023, so we got to wait a year before we get that game. Just a little disappointed to hear about that. But I gotta say, Final Fantasy 16 is looking real, real good. Now, I'm not going to pretend and sit here that I'm a big Final Fantasy guy. I enjoy the Final Fantasy games, the few that I've played, but I'm not like a diehard Final Fantasy fan by any means. Really, my love of the franchise comes from PlayStation 1 in playing Final Fantasy 7 and Final Fantasy 8. Those are the two games that I dove a lot of and spent a lot of time into. I always wanted to play Final Fantasy 9 because I've heard good things about it, but I never got around to it. And then I dabbled a little bit in Final Fantasy 10. And then I played the original Final Fantasy. I played the PSP version of that. So I don't have a lot of experience per se in this franchise. I didn't play the most recent one, Final Fantasy 15. I will say the MMO Final Fantasy 14 has always kind of looked intriguing, especially with its recent success, how that game is just blown up. But this game looks awesome, I gotta say. And I love the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I mean, no surprise there really, but that game is awesome. And so I think what's exciting about Final Fantasy 16 for me is that it's kind of a return to the fantasy genre. Because with Final Fantasy 13 and those sequels, in Final Fantasy 15, it's kind of this mix, this fusion between kind of modern day and fantasy elements. So this seems kind of a return to what we traditionally know Final Fantasy and kind of this fantasy medieval style setting. So I'm looking forward to that return to roots. I loved Final Fantasy VII Remake's combat, as I mentioned. It seems like we're going to get some form of that in this game. So from what I can tell, this is going to be a day one purchase. I'm very much looking forward to this game. And that's how they ended the show. Now, I got to say, overall, I thought it was a very strong showcase. Very, very strong. Probably one of the better state of plays in terms of hits. And I think you could even make an argument that it was the best state of play. Now, again, as I mentioned before with these showcases, not every game will speak to you. That's okay. You also have to temper your expectations. These publishers aren't going to blow their loads, so to speak, on a showcase. We're not going to get that E3 level of showcase every single time. So just remember that. But I think this was really good. There's a lot here, and I think there's a lot of games for a lot of folks that broad appeal, so to speak, for a lot of folks. And one thing too I want to say about VR is that being a console gamer, exclusively a console gamer, I should say, playing on, Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, don't dabble into PC. I think it's really cool to have a VR option on consoles with the PSVR. Now, I understand that the Oculus, you don't need a PC for that. I think that's kind of a self-contained system in and of itself. So I understand that there's those options out there, but I like being in the console ecosystem. And I like one of the things and why I would say there's two main reasons why I'm not a PC gamer. First and foremost is I can't do keyboard and mouse. I'm not good at it. It doesn't feel right to me. It feels awkward. So I want a controller in my hands. I've always played games with a controller in my hands. That's what I'm most comfortable with. That's what I want to do. So that's one. Number two is I want it to work. I don't want to deal with driver updates, messing with files, having to upgrade internal components that are just ridiculously expensive. I have to worry about does my PC run this game? How does it run? I don't want to worry about all that stuff. I just want to put the game in and play. I want my console to work. I want it to run the game and play it. Simple. I want to keep it simple. That's one of the reasons why I like playing on consoles. And so I think it's really cool and it's really exciting about the PSVR. Now, the first PSVR was awesome and really great for what it did. The VR2 having a huge upgrade, it's really cool if you're a console gamer to have this as an option. And I think it's a nice win for Sony to kind of have this niche from a console perspective. Because really the only other competition is on the PC side. Again, I understand the Oculus Rift is its own system, but I would consider that more on the PC side. So I think that's really cool, and that's something certainly to look forward to. And with some of the hits they said in this state of play, I think they're going to have a massive lineup when this thing launches. Now, a couple of things I was disappointed in. Now, I made a YouTube short talking about 3 things that I was looking forward to in this upcoming state of play. First was a PSVR 2 release window. They mentioned that this was going to be a PSVR 2 focused state of play, and it was in the opening segments. So I thought maybe we'd get a glimpse of when that release window was. I thought they maybe a little show off the system a little bit more. They didn't. Now maybe we can kind of speculate, or maybe for lack of a better term, triangulate when the PSVR 2 will release. So we know that Resident Evil 4 is coming out March of next year. They're working on a VR2 component. Resident Evil 8 is also working on a VR2 component. No other release windows I think were given for Walking Dead, No Man's Sky, and Horizon. So presumably sometime after March next year. So springtime, early summer is maybe when we'll see PSVR 2. Maybe. But I was a little disappointed in that. I really was hoping we'd get at least just I'm not asking for a release date, but a release window. Like, when can I expect this thing? But I'm also thinking that maybe, with all the chip shortages and stuff like that, maybe supply chain is an issue. They want to make sure they get enough of these units built and ready. So who knows? The second is I wanted an announcement for that Resident Evil 8 DLC. They had talked about that there's DLC coming for this game. I think they showed that off last year around this time in June during one of their showcases. So it's been a year. It's been quiet. I was hoping for that announcement. And I thought when they brought up Resident Evil 8 in the showcase, I was like, this is it. We're getting it. But we didn't. So I was disappointed there. And lastly, I wanted a release date for Final Fantasy 16. And while we got a semblance of that, I really thought this game would come out this year. There's a lot of rumors saying this game is close to being done and that it could release winter 2022. That's kind of what I was hoping for. It's probably my own fault that I kind of set those expectations up for myself, but nonetheless, we got a summer 2023 release window. That said, though, there were some awesome announcements to take away, as we talked about. My favorites, obviously, number one's Callisto Protocol. I gushed about that game. I'm going to continue to gush about that game. And I just saw, actually, on Twitter that they're going to show off, I think, some gameplay at the Summer Games Fest coming up next week. I could give 2 shits about the Summer Game Fest, I'll be honest. Jeff Keighley is a nice guy. I think he does a lot of cool things in the industry. But most of his, the Game Awards, his showcases are just ad-filled nonsense, if I'm being honest. There's some cool stuff to take away from it, but a lot of time there's so much filler and nonsense in those things, and it's just give me the showcase. Just show me the game, and that's all I need. I don't need 15,000 ads. I don't need an hour-long conversation where you're talking to some dev. Maybe some people like that. That's not for me. But Callisto Protocol, I am very much looking forward to that game. I cannot wait to play it. I hope they hit that window, December 2nd. I really do. Second is Resident Evil 4 Remake. Obviously, I think a lot of people are going to be hyped for this one. Resident Evil 4 is hailed as the best Resident Evil game. I haven't played it. Now, I was kind of thinking, like, should I play the original before the remake? And I think the answer is yes. Because I know when they ported or did the VR version for Resident Evil 4, they changed some things in that game. And not to get into like the censorship conversation, but I want to experience the game as it was originally developed. And so I think the only way to do that is to play the original. Now, I have it on PS4, that port. So I think, I don't know, I say this all the time, but I will dive into that game at some point, fairly soon. And lastly, I think Horizon Call of the Mountain looks awesome. I when that game was first announced, I was like, I don't know about it, but actually kind of seeing some gameplay, what you'll be doing, I think it might be a VR game for me to try. Now, I'll say this about VR. I am prone to motion sickness. And so when in the first PSVR, I played some games, but I can't play too many just because I just can't do it. I get sick. And so like I would love to try like that Star Wars Squadrons game. I know had a VR component, like just flying around in a TIE fighter or X-Wing sounds awesome in VR. And then or Gran Turismo Sport had that. That sounds awesome, but I just know I can't do those because I will get sick. I will genuinely just get sick, and that's not fun, right? That's not a fun experience. But I know with VR as is kind of evolved, it's gotten better because the graphics gotten better, more realistic, higher frame rates. So you can less it tricks your brain better to where you're not going to feel like you're going to get sick. Hopefully that's the case with PSVR 2. But with this game, I feel like maybe it's going to not be so fast paced to where I don't get sick. But like the climbing around like on the mountains and kind of how you navigate the world seems like it'd be fun. I definitely want to shoot a bow and arrow at a dinosaur in VR. I mean, that just sounds awesome. It's funny too, because when they showed off the combat, you can tell it's kind of slowed down compared to the Horizon games. Obviously, because you're in VR, it's first person perspective. So I thought that was interesting, but I'm kind of curious on how those battles kind of go. Because in Horizon, the Horizon games, it's pretty fast paced. You're running around, you're sliding, you're dodging, you're shooting components off the dinosaurs. Like combat is awesome in the Horizon games. So I'm curious how that translates over to VR. So I'll be keeping my eye out on that. I certainly want to get the headset, try it out. I'm sure there's going to be lots of fun things to do with the PSVR 2 when that drops. And the controllers in those things look wild. They look awesome. So there it is. That's the state of play. I've rambled on for an hour and 15 minutes or so. That'll do it for today's show. So let me know what you guys thought about the state of play. What was your favorite announcement? That's the question of the week. What was your favorite announcement from the PlayStation state of play? Let me know down in the comments here on YouTube or right into the show either on Twitter. Yeah, via Twitter or hit us up on Locals. Let me know what your favorite game was from the showcase. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Hope you stay well, stay safe out there. Remember, new episodes of the show go live Mondays 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And until next time, I'm Bonfire, and I'll see you online.